From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Wichita Mayor Lily Wu responds to an ethics complaint filed by the local firefighters union, denying she did anything wrong. A new poll shows the presidential race in Kansas could be closer than many expect. But first, early voting sites have been bombarded by eager voters in Sedgwick County. We'll discuss why and also take a look at some of the key local races as Election Day fast approaches. Join us right now for Kansas Week. Hello and welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cerullo. Huge numbers of voters have been standing in line, sometimes longer than an hour, to cast their ballots early in Sedgwick County. As KAKE's Abby Ray shows us, it's been a record turnout.
It is such a privilege to be able to vote, and it's something I think we all should take seriously, and it's a right that we should be exercising.
Shelly Rodriguez says she stood in line longer than an hour to vote on the Tuesday before Election Day.
It was really encouraging to see how many people care enough to get out and vote, and it was like all types, like young, old. I mean, it was really encouraging.
17 satellite voting locations opened up in the county Tuesday, 4 more than in years past, allowing voters their choice of 20 locations to cast their ballot early. If you wait until Election Day, you'll have to vote at your assigned polling location.
You don't want to be left out of the decision-making process.
Troy Gooch voted at Evangel Presbyterian Church because he lives nearby and knew the spot had just opened for early voting.
I figured it'd be a shorter line today, but it was a little bit longer than I anticipated, so that's good.
Sedgwick County Election Commissioner Laura Rainwater says the county is seeing record turnout, and every polling location has lines. A very different picture than in recent elections.
These last 2 elections we had, the turnout was very low, and so it's exciting to see all these voters interested and voting. That's what this country is founded on.
Rainwater says the lines will stay long through Election Day, so be sure to carve out some time to make your voice heard and vote.
You can't complain about what's going on in this country if you don't take part in the process.
In West Wichita, Abby Ray, KAKE News on your side.
And here to discuss what's driving this record turnout and talk about some of the key local and state races, I'm joined by Wichita Eagle opinion editor Dion Leffler, KWCH reporter Sean Logging, and former Wichita City Council member Brian Fry. Welcome to all of you. Dion, I'll start with you. You are certainly no stranger to elections. What is it that's driving this record turnout?
Well, this situation is infuriating, it's unnecessary, and it is intolerable, frankly. The reason that we're having these long lines is because a decision was made by our county commission and the Secretary of State that our election office could not distribute absentee ballot applications, the application to get the absentee ballot. They used to send those to every voter, and thousands of people used those, and so they stopped doing that. And it's all part of this ridiculous stop the steal nonsense that we saw in 2020.
So let me get this straight. Are you an advocate for permanent absentee ballots? You don't have to tell the county election office every single election that you want an absentee ballot? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. What I'm saying is they used to send the application. Nobody ever sent all the ballots. I mean, some states do. I voted in Nevada that way when I was a much younger man. It was fine. But the thing is they used to send the application to get an absentee ballot, which reminded people that there's an election coming up, and if you want to vote by mail, send in this application. Well, now you have to basically apply to get an application. And it's ridiculous. It is the direct cause of the long lines that we are seeing that is disenfranchising voters, because not everybody can afford the time to stand in line for an hour to an hour and a half to cast a vote. It's absurd. They need to change this for the next election. They should have changed it long ago. But this is just, it's an outrage, frankly.
Well, Brian Fry, Diane has a pretty strong opinion.
No, and I appreciate where you're coming from. I get it. I guess I'm a traditionalist. I like to vote day of. I've always been that way since my first vote for Reagan in 1980. So it's one of those things that I think there's been a lot of controversy, certainly. I know they've opened up a lot more polling locations because of that.
A lot more being a fraction of what we used to have.
Well, okay. But again, I wasn't part of that decision.
Yeah.
I understand the criticism on both sides, the cynical nature of the steal. And look, whatever happens, I think whoever wins, the losers are going to challenge, no matter what. Whether it's a close race or a wide margin, I think there's going to be challenge on both sides, just because of things like that.
Yeah. Sean Logging, what about the presidential race? Nobody has talked about this It's no secret that the presidential election contests always drive higher
Of course,
turnout.
top of the ballot races, of course, are the big draw for a lot of voters. Like you talk about down ballot races, a lot of people don't even know what candidate they're voting on or who they are. So I think part of the reason why you have more people voting early too is it's just becoming more popular across the country. Like you see, people like the option of having more than just one day to vote, because we're not like back in the 1800s where people horsed up their wagon and had to drive to town for the day or two to go vote. People like the option of not just voting on election day, but voting before, because sometimes things come up. They have other plans. I talked with a pair of voters earlier this week who just had a new grandchild, so they were going to go visit them this weekend and preferred to vote early rather than having to race back here for election day.
And let's face it, a lot of voters are older, elderly, and if it rains or storms, the weather turns bad, they may not be able to vote if there's only one day to do it. So.
Again, you make a great point. If the weather is bad, that could really sway an election turnout. And so having that advanced ballot opportunity certainly is a plus.
Especially if you got people lined up outside the building.
Yeah.
But it's good, though, a week ahead of time. My schedule, taking my case, for instance, I went Tuesday, and the line was wrapped around the building twice. I knew I wasn't going to have time to do that. I came back the next day and was able to wait 30 minutes, and we got it done. So it's a good thing that a lot of people are turning out, right?
Oh.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it would be a better thing if they hadn't screwed up voting by mail so that we wouldn't have these long lines. These long lines they are negative to democracy. Now, we did everything we could at the Wichita Eagle. We published the voter application in our paper. We set aside a significant amount of space to do that. And, if they won't defend democracy, we will.
How many did you get?
We don't know.
You have no idea how many people downloaded it?
Well, the election office doesn't. The election office can't tell us how many.
But they had to download it from your site, right?
No, we printed them in the newspaper.
You printed it in the paper, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about some specific races now. Let's start out first with the U.S. House, the 4th District race. That race is between incumbent Republican Congressman Ron Estes and not necessarily political newcomer Esau Freeman. He's quite familiar with the political process. Freeman is a Democrat, and I believe he is still the president or the leader of the local union that represents service employees for the city and county, things like that. So, Diane, again, I'll start with you. What's the difference between this race here, and is Estes going to be a shoe-in here, or what?
Well, I think, these races are never. These races are never super competitive. The 4th Congressional District is drawn to be a Republican favoring district. And, from our perspective, and I'm speaking from my perspective as opinion editor of the Wichita Eagle and the leader of our editorial board, we endorsed Freeman in this race for one reason, basically, that Ron Estes voted to continue to challenge the election results after being chased from his own Capitol offices and the floor of the House by the riot on January 6th. And we've made a command decision to not endorse any candidate who continued that effort after that horrible display of un-Americanism that we saw.
But Brian Fry, it's no secret the Wichita Eagle heavily endorses Democrat.
Yeah, I expected nothing less from the Eagle on this. Congressman Estes has done an amazing job serving the 4th District and will continue to do it. He is representative, he is active in the district. You see him weighing in and representing his electorate very well. And he's done a lot of great things for Kansas, and I continue to see that happening. So Esau's a good person. I've worked with him when I was on the council, and I could always relate and talk to him very well, and I'm glad that he's running because he's probably the best challenger we've seen in that district in some time. But that being said, Ron's going to win this handily.
Well, to set the record straight, though, we have endorsed Ron in the past, but we just found the January 6th situation to be a disqualifying event.
Understood. Sean Logging, from a reporter standpoint, what are you seeing in this congressional
I think what's going to
race?
be interesting, too, is just the union support that Esau gets, especially from both the aerospace workers and then the local service workers, because unions do have a very powerful voice here locally in this community. We've just seen it with the Textron strike, and so just what type of support he's able to get from those union membership could be very interesting for sure.
And the next race we're going to talk about is Sedgwick County Commission. Democrat Sarah Lopez is the incumbent in that race. She would be elected to a second term if she wins this race. And she is facing a challenger in Republican Jeff Blubaugh, former city councilman. And of course, so Brian Fry, I'll start with you. Both of us served on the Wichita City Council alongside Jeff Blubaugh. What are your thoughts on this race?
And at the same time, while Sarah was a county commissioner.
Right.
So, look, the district is heavily Republican, and Jeff did 11 years on the city council because he had an unexpired term that he filled for 2 years. And he very much represented his district extremely well during his time. I don't think I saw anyone more connected from a constant communication with his district than him. He has run a very good campaign, a very positive, a very clean campaign. I think we have seen evidence from her assassins that have been very negative and very ugly, quite frankly, and Jeff has stayed above that. And so I think that speaks to his integrity and his personality.
Dion, there's been allegations of dark money coming into this race.
Oh my God, let me clutch my pearls. You know, there's so much dark money flowing through Wichita. I got five hit mailings from I got 5 hit mailings from the Republican Party in my mailbox in the last 7 days that
From this race?
No, not from this race.
This race, no.
Not from this race. It was for Dan Hawkins, and I'm not even in that district. You know, so I mean,
But that was clearly labeled Republican Party. I wouldn't consider that dark money, unlike some of these unknown PACs that have an anonymous address, who's behind it.
The Republicans have been doing it for years, and you and I both know that. So
But again, when you say dark money, you can't call the Republican Party dark money.
Well,
Let me say this. I'm in this district. I live in this district.
I do too.
And so I have been receiving the mailers myself, and the mailers that I received, I didn't even know who was in charge of the Political Action Committee. I easily figured it out. I consider myself pretty well connected to the political, and I didn't even know who was behind it. I had to do my own investigation. How is the regular person supposed to be able to figure that out?
And making stuff up in some of those mailings too. I mean, it's just completely unfair to the voter.
How is the regular voter supposed to figure this out?
How many third-party mailings have you got from Republicans over the years? I mean, it's like, they do one thing, and then when the other side does the same thing, then all of a sudden it's a problem.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. We've seen it from both sides. It definitely doesn't show any partisanship, or does show partisanship there. But in this race, between Blubaugh and Lopez, we have not seen it from Jeff's camp. We've seen it from her camp.
I do need to move on. Sean, from a reporter standpoint, what are you seeing from this local race?
I think Sarah Lopez definitely has a lot to run on. She helped to bring the State Mental Health Hospital to that area. That construction is going to be starting here later this year or early next year, and that's a big accomplishment for her district. So that's something that she can definitely run on. I think I think she also has some other things that she can run on from her first term in office. So we'll see how it turns out, of course. A lot to watch.
And then the other local county commission race, Democrat Celeste Racette, who is no stranger to the local political scene in Wichita, is running against also newcomer Republican Stephanie Wise. This is the seat that David Dennis is vacating because he decided not to run again. So this will be a new person, a completely new person that takes this seat. Dion, what do you think about this race?
Oh, this is fun. I mean, this is a great race because, you know, frankly, both candidates are really good. You know, if you live in the 3rd district, you really can't go wrong in this one. Because, you know, I mean, you have Wise. She's very smart, very involved, very active. She's been on the district advisory board, and she's, you know, she knows what's going on. And then you've got Celeste Racette, who is the person who basically saved Century 2 and has shown her ability to work across the aisle.
Plenty of grassroots type of experience with
well,
Celeste.
when you look at the Save Century 2 movement, it was her and Carl Peterjohn and John Todd, who are two of the most conservative Republicans
That's true.
that we have in this city. So I mean, I don't see how you can go wrong in that one. It's a hard race to pick.
But Brian, the numbers show, I think the primary numbers had 9,000 people voting for Wise and about 1,500 Democrats voting for Racette.
Yeah, it's a very strong Republican district, especially when you consider Western Sedgwick County. Look, I think Celeste still thinks she's running for mayor. She speaks about city issues more than she speaks about county issues in this race. I'm like, does she really know what she's running for? I think she likes the attention rather than the actual serving, what this role will require. And Stephanie has shown that she understands the issues as it relates to the county responsibility of serving as a county commissioner.
What's the newsroom saying about this race? Sean?
I guess we'll have to watch and see. That's the big thing on election night is you just never know, especially with, of course, local races. It could go either way. It just depends on like turnout margins. Of course, we saw that in a lot of other local races as well.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to polling data released this week. Indicates the presidential race here in Kansas may be closer than some would expect. Cake's Nick Nelson shows us former President Trump's margin of victory in Kansas may be lower this year than in 2016 and 2020.
The presidential election vote is not a focus of Kansas Speaks survey. We always focus on public policies that would help public officials to make decisions regarding different policies. But it happens to be an election year, so we asked that question.
The latest Kansas Speaks survey from Fort Hays State University's Docking Institute shows a surprisingly close presidential race in Kansas among registered voters. Former President Donald Trump is leading Vice President Kamala Harris, but only by 5 percentage points, 48.2 to 43.2. Compare that to the 2020 presidential election, where Trump got 56% of the vote to Joe Biden's 41.5%. Jen Sun, Assistant Director of the Docking Institute, explains the survey was taken between September 26th and October 16th, and that some voters may have changed their minds since then before casting their ballot.
When we conduct a survey, we try to match our sample with the Kansas population based on age, gender, and county population. So we try to match those 8 largest urban counties population with the versus the non-metro population. And after we collect the data, we also did some weighting based on certain demographic characteristics. Our sample are overrepresenting certain population group.
Friends University political science professor Russell Arbin Fox says while the poll is an interesting snapshot of how the political winds have shifted on the presidential level in Kansas, he still expects Trump to win Kansas by a comfortable margin.
I think the safe guess is that most of these Republicans will come home. I actually think that what you're more likely to see is Republicans who, in the end, they're going to vote for Trump, but you know, maybe they're not going to be Republican all the way down the line.
Fox says, however, some analysts may now be looking at Kansas to see how other rural areas across the country are moving politically.
They're going to be making comparisons to other rural counties, particularly in swing states. I mean, how much of a bellwether is it? I mean, we can't tell yet, but there are people who are going to be looking at it and they're going to be saying, yeah, here's the demographics of Kansas. We can make parallels to the demographics of voters in these states.
Brian Fry, I'll start with you. Is Kansas and our 6 congressional electoral votes, are we any closer to turning blue or purple, or what's going on here?
No, we've obviously seen the change in Johnson County and Sedgwick County turn more purple, specifically Sedgwick County. So those are going to be that. The rest of the state, though, will still be strong for Trump and huge Republican turnout, I think. And again, the down ballot, because of all the other Republicans, you'll see Trump will win Kansas.
Dion, you agree?
Yeah, I think it's probably a foregone conclusion that Trump is going to win this state. But it's really interesting. It's been an interesting election year because, first of all, I have never seen as much enthusiasm for a Democratic candidate as I have for Kamala Harris in this state.
Not even Barack Obama?
I mean, there's not even. I mean, it's just, I mean, there's a Facebook group, Women for Kamala Harris, that within days of starting had over 35,000 members. And it, so there's that, there's a groundswell of support there. And also, if you look at the Washington Post's analysis of campaign contributions, more money has been contributed to the Harris campaign in the state than has been contributed to the Trump campaign. I want to talk about the Kansas Speaks survey for just a second.
Sure.
Because I never really put much credence in it over the years until the value of them both amendment. Mm-hmm. And they, because it always would come out and say, okay, well, 6 out of 10 Kansans are pro-choice. And then when we finally got a chance to vote on it, it was 6 out of 10 Kansans. So it's like, I mean, their credibility went way up in my eyes.
Yeah. Sean Logging, anything to add?
Yeah, so I talked with Dr. Alexandra Middlewood at WSU. She was part of the Kansas Speaks survey this year, and she said one of the things that would be interesting to watch is just how that margin is. She doesn't think it's going to be the 5% that we saw in the results, but she said it's probably going to be potentially a lot closer than we saw back in 2020, because, of course, as you mentioned, Johnson County is leaning very strongly Democratic. Mm-hmm. It is a very big city, a very big part of the voter share here in Kansas.
Lawrence adds to that too.
Yeah, and of course too, you have Shawnee and things like that where you see more Democratic support in those areas. So it's going to be just what type of margin it is between the two candidates, I think would be key.
Yeah, it's going to be very close, I think.
And our last story today, Wichita Mayor Lily Wu says an ethics complaint filed against her by the local firefighters union is false and frivolous. Cake's Jocelyn Schifferdecker explains what this is all about.
Wichita Fire Union President Ted Bush is now waiting. The union filed this complaint against Wichita Mayor Lily Wu, saying she violated city ordinance when she allegedly went to the fire chief directly and told her she had to lay off 42 firefighters before the end of 2025.
I'm not blaming or not saying that Mayor Wu did this. I'm saying I was told she did this. And in that case, I have to report this to the City Ethics Committee.
Bush says Fire Chief Tammy Snow told him the mayor came to her and made the demand. He says per city policy, these decisions need to be made by the entire city council publicly.
That's why there's the ordinance. It doesn't allow one person to try to make a decision on their own, especially the mayor.
Bush says cutting 40-plus firefighter positions would devastate the fire department.
Every station is busy. We don't have enough as it is. And for someone to even contemplate laying off 42 firefighters is just, to us, is just mind-blowing.
The city council has discussed eliminating more than 40 firefighter positions, but has never taken a vote. Bush says a federal grant pays for those jobs, and it runs out next year. The mayor tells Cake News she responded to the complaint in writing Tuesday evening. She says she denies any and all allegations and has continuously supported public safety, calling the allegations a continuation of the union's repeated attacks to damage her reputation. She says she respects the ethics board to do its work and will cooperate fully in any investigation. Bush says he too will cooperate. He says it's important to hold elected officials accountable.
What kind of representative would I be if I ignored a violation of city ordinance?
Former City Councilman Brian Fry, this is a touchy subject, you know. I think we can both agree, all of us at the table can agree, that if the mayor did give such a direct order, that's a problem. But that's a big if at this point. Nobody knows.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? That's why we have to let the due process work. Look, I was on the council when we passed the ethics policy. I filed the first complaint against Mayor Whipple, and I think I had much more evidence than what Ted is showing here. He doesn't have evidence, it appears. It's a he said, she said type of thing. Let the process work. Let the ethics committee do their job. Whether this happened or not, did he even get it right? Right? I mean, we don't know. We know Ted can be very liberal with his words, especially if it's for the union, right? So let's let it play out. Let's see. I don't believe there's anything wrong in what the mayor did. I met with department managers. I know you did. And we would represent our district
Absolutely.
and say, this is what we'd like to see done. It still, at the end of the day, takes at least 4 votes, sometimes 5, to get anything accomplished.
Dion, in about 30, 45 seconds.
Well, I'm a little torn on this one. Like Brian said, I mean, you know, elected officials meet with department heads and they talk about stuff. And, you know, I'm kind of with him. I mean, we got to let this process play out. And the, you know, and the other part that I'm trying to figure out is if the fire department is down as many positions as they say it is, then what would eliminating those positions really mean?
Yeah, a lot. Sean, you covered this story this week.
Yeah, so of course, too, the big question is if Mayor Wu actually directed the fire chief to eliminate these positions, basically telling her to initiate layoffs. That's a big question here. That's, of course, as you said, it's something we have to wait and see from the ethics board. It could take a few months here before they actually complete their investigation, release their findings, and of course, between now and then, very little is going to be said.
All right. We are out of time for this week. Again, I want to thank Dion Leftler, Sean Logging, and Brian Fry for joining us. And we'd also love to hear from you as well. You can send us your emails at kansasweek@kpts.org. And of course, thanks to Cake and KSN for sharing their stories with us. Have a great weekend. I'm Jared Cerullo.